Hello and welcome to episode number 620 of Smart Podcast Trashy Books. I'm Sarah Wendell and my guest today is Oriana Leckert. Oriana is the head of publishing at Kickstarter and works with the many authors who are finding community support on Kickstarter. They are hosting a celebration all this month, Heartstrings and Hardbacks, Kickstarter and Romance. So we connected to talk about successful romance projects, strategies that work and don't work on Kickstarter, and the evolution of fandom, which is a topic I'm always curious about. Oriana has worked in publishing for a long time, and her entire employment experience is part of her current job. She's also the author of a book called Brooklyn Spaces, and it sounds like a really cool project. I will have links to everything we talk about in the show notes at smartbitchestrashybooks.com/podcast under episode 620. Hello, and thank you to our Patreon community. You keep me going. Every week, you make sure every episode has a transcript. Hey, garlic knitter. I cannot thank you enough for your support. If you like the show and you value what we do here, have a look at patreon.com/smartbitches. All right, shall we get started with this podcast? Let's find out all about what Kickstarter is up to. It's cool. On with the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm Oriana Leckert. I'm the head of publishing at Kickstarter. My job, I believe I've described it as one part sort of literary industry expert, one part crowdfunding consultant, one part life coach, and one part cheerleader. I basically help people figure out whether their work makes sense for Kickstarter and then try to help set them up for success if they think that it does. So really, I get to work with a pretty incredible array of authors, illustrators, publishers, art book makers, photo book designers, just helping people figure out how to raise money to bring their literary dreams to life. It is an incredible job that I feel very lucky to have.
There's a lot. I have a lot of questions here. This is a really interesting, I think, sort of extremely new technology publishing job. Because publishing is such an old industry, and you are doing a lot of the familiar, like there's a lot of familiar words in your job description, but you're doing it on an entirely new platform. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I mean, it is and it isn't. You know, when I started at Kickstarter, some of our like onboarding materials are like the Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded. You know, like conceptually, crowdfunding is not actually so new.
No.
But yes, indeed, I do work at a tech company. I work on one of the analog teams at the tech company. Most of the folks are like engineers doing their, all sorts of back end machinations, whereas I just get to professionally be friends with people. But
sounds like publishing. Yep. Story checks out.
My background is sort of half and half traditional book publishing and digital media. So I was an arts and culture journalist for a long time. I also was a freelance editor for many, many years. I've worked at a lot of different points on the publishing landscape. I started out at Random House before they had absorbed Penguin. I've been a fact checker for a book packager. I was a matchmaker for ghostwriters. I've done, freelance editorial consulting and editing and copy editing and proofreading for probably over 100 small to medium presses and magazines all across the country. So I do have like a pretty vast knowledge of like all of the different ways that publishing can happen, which I think is really helpful to bring to bear to this kind of work. But crowdfunding and Kickstarter specifically have long been sort of denigrated by the traditional publishing industry as for like desperate losers who can't get a book deal. And
of course they did. They're not getting a cut.
Exactly, obviously. So I try to do a lot of work to sort of like shift that perception and help people understand that like doing something like crowdfunding brings you back all the control. It gives you a direct line to your readers, which is not available through most avenues of traditional publishing. A lot of the work that a publisher would require you to do, community building, brand management, like all of that, you're going to have to do that anyway. Why not just do it on your own, reap all the benefits, keep all the control, DIY, baby.
Yep. I know a few people who have worked in publishing and have left publishing and have gone to work at tech companies of different types. And I remember one person telling me that a lot of her job was explaining how absolutely bonkers publishing is as a business. Do you spend a lot of time explaining to people who are like tech people and who have worked in the tech sector? And they're like, okay, so first of all, it runs on consignment. It's nothing makes sense. just don't expect any of the things I'm about to tell you to make sense, but here's how it works. Like, do you do that too? Do you spend a lot of time translating publishing as an industry?
100%. I mean, in fact, I don't know if this would have crossed your radar, but when the Department of Justice was suing Penguin Random House and Simon and Schuster to stop that merger, Kickstarter was actually brought up in that suit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then how that worked, one of the big execs. So firstly, I don't know if you heard, Brandon Sanderson raised $43 million on Kickstarter last year.
I did hear.
The highest funded crowdfunding campaign of all time in all categories on all platforms. Kind of a big deal.
Bigger than the GDP of several countries.
I've never phrased it like that, but I should.
It is. It literally is bigger than the GDP of many nations.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so what happened was the DOJ's case hinged on monopsony,
yeah.
I'm not going to bother. Your readers can Google it if they don't already, or your listeners, I mean. But the idea was that it would decrease advances if all of the companies are just kind of like, they're like different imprints, but they all ladder up to the same budget line.
Yeah.
So one of the executives said, look, if people don't like the advances that we are offering, they could just run a Kickstarter like Brandon Sanderson did and raise as much money as they possibly could want, which, like, LOL times a million, obviously. But so that happened. Of course, everybody at Kickstarter was like, what are they saying? What does this mean? Wait, are they really testifying that publishing just runs on vibes?
Yeah.
And nobody knows how it works or whether it's going to go well? Yeah. And I was like, please, yes. Please sit down. Let me tell you all of, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, you're like, well, none of what just came out of that guy's mouth is a surprise, including the now former CEO of Random House, who was like, I have no idea how a bestseller is made. It's just random. And I'm like, I am the person who interacts with all the publicists and all the people in marketing who do not earn a lot of money, who have Sharpies and box cutters. And all of them were just like, fuck you, asshole. Totally. Pardon my language, but oh my goodness. So I imagine that your job, you translate the absolute wackadoodle unhinged nature of this whole business.
Yep. Because, our Kickstarter's publishing department is me. There's not like a vast team of people who are, so yes. I mean, the truth is most people at Kickstarter are not thinking about publishing all that often, unlike me, who was thinking about it all day, every day, forever for my whole life. But yes, every once in a while, someone's like, I'm sorry, it works how?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, your industry does what?
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm afraid so.
You know how if you are in a sales, you are selling a thing, right? You can go and see how many units have sold of your thing from your inventory, right? If you publish with a publisher, you're going to get that data in pieces 90 to 120 days later when it is useless to you. Enjoy. Totally. And that's supposed to be a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, that's fun. This is like a deeper thing that I did not expect I'd talk about on this podcast, but I am actually, this is far into the future, but I would like Kickstarter to be a reporting entity for BookScan.
Yes.
Because, I mean, that's part of like why this data is so borked is like, it's not counting so many of the like weird, new, strange sales avenues. And so like,
you should absolutely be in there.
We had I've had a lovely couple of calls with them with our chief strategy officer, and they were like, we'd love it. We'd love to have Kickstarter reporting. All we're going to need from you is metadata, sales information, like ISB, like all of this stuff. And we were like, it's going to be a minute before Kickstarter could even possibly consider collecting that kind of data, let alone escalating it to you in a regular report. Anyway, it is on I think maybe next year we might be able to get it due to a lot of changes that are happening internally at Kickstarter, where we will actually be collecting a lot more data in a lot of different ways, but we are not there yet at all.
So tell me, you've mentioned the publishing department, and it is a department of one. What do you do? What is your job?
Yeah, I mean, it is a weird job with very few analogs in the rest of the world. I truly am like so blessed. I get to wake up every morning.
Me too.
Like,
yep. I understand completely.
What my job is.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. I do a lot of travel. A lot of it is being out in the world of my categories. So, as we have been emailing about, I was just in Denver for a couple of weeks. I did Readers Take Denver, and then the IBPA Publishing University. I was on the keynote panel. This year's theme is Rise and Disrupt. So I got to talk about how Kickstarter is disrupting publishing.
They hate when that happens, by the way. I don't know if you know this, but they really don't like it.
Yeah, I know. They really Yeah. Yes. So I do a lot of, I also do a lot of virtual stuff. I do things like this. I do all kinds of webinars, and I'm doing a Reddit AMA for the first time ever next week.
Ooh.
Yeah. So like all kinds of just sort of like spreading the word, really like explaining how to think about Kickstarter differently or how to think about Kickstarter at all. Because, I used to go to AWP every year, and that was a whole lot of conversations of like, you can have books on Kickstarter, so sort of like starting even there of like, yes, you can, and we care about them, and here's why, blah, blah, blah. I also work a lot directly with creators. I have, there's about 150 projects launching and publishing every week. So I am not up to the guts of all of them, but when possible, I can talk to people about strategy. I offer a lot of guidance about sort of like how to structure a campaign, how to like think about your promotion, all of the various ways to like build your community before, during, and after. My day-to-day job is like certainly a lot of Zoom meetings or just like gallivanting all around the country and occasionally the world. And then, just like 100 million emails a minute of like trying to help people be as successful as they can with their projects.
Yep. Yeah, piece of cake.
Yeah.
It's
no,
fascinating to me to hear you talk about how you, on one hand, have an audience that's like, oh, Brandon Sanderson made $43 million. I'll make him $43 million. Right. And then you have people who are like, there are books on Kickstarter. You have a very wide audience to reach.
Yeah. Yes, that is extremely true.
And it helps, I think, with romance specifically, that there have been some really successful projects, especially Katie Roberts and Bonkers Romance, and people who have really created a very unique opportunity for their readers. It reminds me a lot of the sort of exclusive boxes that used to be like Illuma Crate, or remember Birchbox? I remember Birchbox. That was a fun makeup subscription. But you take out the intermediary and you're like, no, I'm making the box. Like Lucy Eden. I had a call with her once and she was showing me the design of her box. Every single surface of the box that it comes in is used in some way to build the experience.
I use Lucy's project as an example all the time. In fact, I'm getting ahead of myself, but so we haven't even talked about like romance on Kickstarter specifically, but I will say, since
my next question is that, so bring it up and whenever you like.
Totally. Well, okay. So I will just quickly say, I'm doing a live event with Lucy. Actually, we're doing a panel discussion in Brooklyn at the Ripped Bodice, which started on Kickstarter, next Friday. It's going to be me, Lucy. You'd think I'd be ready to say all the names. Melissa Kucera, who's a fantasy novelist, who's going to be moving into romance, and Adriana Herrera. So the three of us, four of us will be talking all things sort of like romance, Kickstarter. And that is sort of a kickoff to, okay, here, I'm going to back up a little step, because another part of my job, which I didn't even get to, is that each year I sort of get to say, like, where is a place that Kickstarter is not serving or could be doing better? Like, what's a section of my world that I could be focused on? And in 2021, I decided that segment was going to be romance. I felt like we've always had a super strong sci-fi fantasy contingent on the platform, but why not romance? I mean, romance novelists could not be more perfectly positioned to, by necessity, having been denigrated by the traditional industry for all of history, had to do everything themselves, had to become so adept at, building their audiences, working with their communities, making direct lines to their readers, figuring out how to produce all the books that traditional publishing was not going to help them do. And I said, I think that there is something here. So I actually pulled some data for you to share, just to show that, like, to toot my own horn a small bit.
Please toot your horn and share data. Data is so sexy. Bring as many pieces of data as you like.
Totally. I love it. So in 2021, we had 20 romance projects, which raised, where's my number, about 200 grand. Last year in 2023, we had 317, which raised just shy of $6 million. So romance has been growing tremendously year over year because of people exactly like, so, Katie, Bonkers, and I would also count Willow Winters as
Willow Winters for sure.
Early triumphs. Willow, I was on a panel with, by the way, at Readers Take Denver. She is every bit as delightful in person as you would have assumed she would be. I think I sort of like turned my focus there. Those three gals and gal collectives did incredible campaigns. And I spoke that in 2021 virtually at RAM, at the Romance Authors Mastermind. And so I think like those sort of things combined were really what kind of launched this whole, like, I think really good success of bringing romance to Kickstarter, bringing Kickstarter to the romance community. And so it worked well enough that the company writ large has finally taken notice. And so this summer, we're doing a spotlight on romance in July. We call these open calls or prompts. They're sort of excuses or encouragements or enticements to get many of a certain kind of project on the platform at the same time. We've done this in film with something called Long Story Short. That's for short films. We do Zine Quest for RPG games. We've done Witch Starter, which we will continue to do every October. And that's like cross category, everything sort of like spooky, witchy, new agey, anything from like a tarot deck to a record that you made on a theremin to like a comic about vampires. And so July, we're calling it Heartstrings and Hardbacks. It's not only for hardbacks.
But alliteration is important.
And so honestly, what happened is we had a different name with an ampersand, and we all got so excited about how sexy ampersands are that we were like, we have to come up with a name that has an ampersand in it. So Heartstrings and Hardbacks. And so what happens during these prompts, any publishing project that is romance specific that is live at any point in July. So it can launch in June, it can launch at the end of July and run through August. We're going to be doing extra newsletters, a dedicated landing page, extra resources, social promo. And I'm like out here doing stuff like this marvelous podcast, the panel next week, my Reddit AMA, like all of these ways that like we're just showing that like Kickstarter cares about romance and we want to see more of it. And we think this is like a great home for you to come and do your books and find great success.
Oh, for sure. And if you're going to unite a fandom and a creative person or an artist, the platform that allows both of those parties the most engagement and the biggest cut of the money that is made is a very, very attractive concept for many people, especially because it's harder and harder to make money selling books in retail spaces. Like it's just hard.
Two really, really key things that make Kickstarter very special for authors is that our cut is 5%.
Yep.
5%. Also, we have Stripe who processes our payments. They take 3 to 4%. Even so, you're paying less than 10% in fees, which is so much less than you're paying to any other avenue through which you might sell your books. And also, Kickstarter is in the business of giving you your audience. This has been like foundational to Kickstarter since long before it kind of like mattered the way it matters now. But like as we see the continued fracturing and dissolution of social platforms, as we watch these like, mercurial to malevolent executives with a flick of the wrist change their algorithm in a way that now that like 100,000 strong audience that you've worked so hard for, you can no longer access or not as effectively. Like if you run a Kickstarter campaign, first of all, during the campaign, you get a tremendous amount of data about where your backers are, where they're coming from. Are they using desktop or mobile? What time of day are they backing? Which of your promotional avenues have reached them? And then afterward, you get everybody's email addresses. You get to send them surveys. You get to ask them all sorts of questions. Like this is just what Kickstarter has done, but now like holding on to those direct avenues to reach your readers is so much more important than ever. This is something that like we can do for our authors that like Amazon's not going to give you, everything else is like a black box.
So what are some strategies that you recommend for a romance author on Kickstarter? And conversely, what doesn't always work?
Yeah, such good questions. The tactics are not measurably different for romance authors than kind of any other authors. I mean, very broadly, you want to build your community before you start. You want to make sure that Kickstarter can help you. A publishing project on average, it's like 15 to 30% of your backers will come just through the Kickstarter ecosystem. And we track that in your dashboard so you can watch it. But you need to bring your audience first. You need to have it. This is one of my corniest lines, but like everybody thinks about the funding side of crowdfunding. You equally need to think just as much about the crowd. That's what you're doing with this kind of fundraising is you're figuring out who is in my crowd? Where are they? How do I reach them? What do they want? How do I give it to them? So Kickstarter provides both the excuse and the mechanism to sort of like make those connections. And so one tactic that I recommend, especially for a first-time Kickstarterer, talk to your audience before you start. Get them excited about the project as a concept. We're going to be doing a box set, a special edition, recovers of my first series, a new book, a new genre, whatever it is. Start telling people about that.
Yeah.
Then you can say to them, and guess what? We're going to do it on Kickstarter. Here are all the reasons why. The next step is we've got a pre-launch page. Click this button to be notified on launch.
Yep.
And make your account now so you can have access to those early bird rewards before they're gone.
Don't miss out.
Blah, blah, whatever it is you need to do. So this way, by the time you've launched, you've really warmed up your audience in terms of what you're doing. They're really excited about it. They want it. They've removed all of that friction that's going to stop them from like jumping on right away and giving you their money.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's an interesting audience too, because some of the people who I've seen do campaigns on Kickstarter are like, we want to start a business. We want to do this. We want to do this thing, but we can't do it without you. We need your help to start the thing.
Yeah.
The starter part of Kickstarter. And then there's people who are like, we're doing this thing. You need to get in on it.
Yeah.
The thing will be done. You just want to get in now as opposed to not now, because then the thing will be done, but you won't be in it. And it's a very subtle difference, right?
Yeah, and they both work equally well. I mean, another sort of misconception that I am often pushing against is people say, oh, running a Kickstarter, that's just like begging for charity. But it is exactly not. You are saying, support me early in this creative endeavor and get stuff in return.
Yeah.
The reward structure at Kickstarter is also, I think, like super exciting and really fun. Like it allows you to give your audience not just the book, which not to say just, I mean, the book itself is thrilling and incredible, but you can do all sorts of things with rewards we were talking about Lucy Eden. She convened a huge number of community creators who make candles and soaps and like scarves, all of these things. She got ones that were themed to the various books. So the box was full of not just books, but swag and like all of these other, I think you can also do crazy conceptual rewards. Matt Dinneman, who writes Lit RPG about zombies, for $666, he would kill you off in his next book. And for $677, he would bring you back to life.
Oh.
Think how delightful. I mean, for an author that you care so much about, I've also seen all kinds of naming rights. Name the dragon after your dog, name the villain after your mother-in-law, name the prince after your son. Like getting yourself, it just like, fosters these connections between readers and writers that are so deep and so thrilling. Like, where else in publishing do you get to do that?
And it's interesting because the concept, one of the things I actually wanted to ask you about, which wasn't in my original suite of questions, but I am curious about your thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about the evolution of fandom and how fandom in romance especially has changed a lot. And I mean, I've been running Smart Bitches for almost 20 years. So I've seen my own evolution as a fan and what I want to do and what I don't want to do. But I look at that and I think, okay, but people now understand where their art comes from. And social media has made it so that artists can say, actually, here's what it costs me to make these things. And people are more aware of and happy in most cases to support the artists that they like, whether it's through Patreon or through Kickstarter. The understanding is if I want this thing that I enjoy to continue, I need to help support it. And being able to do so where you're doing so directly is a big incentive, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, publishing too it's so opaque. I mean, I've spent my whole career in publishing, but if you gave me a Word document and said, make me a book, I probably couldn't.
No.
So like another thing that like these sorts of direct community supports can do is it can demystify that whole process. I mean, with Kickstarter, I'm sure with Patreon, with anything else, like you do backer updates, you say like, here's the books coming in from the printer, or here's the way that you get books. Did you know they come from Asia on a boat? Did you know, like, here's how, like,
tracking my shipping container.
Totally. Like a real sausage getting made, which gives people, I think, so much more respect to their creators who are doing it. And also just like, I have to always tell people like Kickstarter backers are less price sensitive. They're much more patient because they are like seeing the world of creativity like come to life before their eyes.
Right.
You know, it's not at all the same as like clicking a couple of links to like get a book that appears at your house delivered by some poor, you know, guy who's like dodging the Ring cameras and like trying not to get a parking ticket. Like you really get to like see all of the aspects of like how these things develop and come to you.
So starting with your fandom, engaging them, and then saying, hey, and we're going to do it on Kickstarter, and here's the pre-order page. Building a more active warm audience from an already warm audience is clearly a good strategy. What are some other strategies you recommend?
Yeah, totally. So, you know, the next thing will be kind of like developing your project page. They're both relatively simple and can be as complicated as you want. Choosing a strong project image is really important. I like that I work in books because it's the same thing as choosing a good cover for your book. It is a harder explanation for like people who are doing films or art or various other things. You know, making good use of your title and subtitle. Kickstarter's algorithm works on attention, not really as much on keywords. You can always tell when people are coming from KDP because the title of their project will be like reverse harem lesbian romance set on the moon rather than just like the title of their book.
Yep.
Because they're so accustomed to having to lard everything up with keywords.
Did a whole post about what I call the SEO titles.
Yeah, 100%. You really
SEO
don't
titles
have to do that.
are just everywhere.
Oh, and I get it. I mean, no shade to people who
absolutely, I get it. It's annoying.
You don't need to do that on
Kickstarter. I get it.
It's not really going to help you. You know, Kickstarter is really designed for storytelling. So your project page, of course, you're going to talk about the plot of your book, but you also can talk about who you are, what brought you to this work, what inspires you, collaborators, your timeline, your budget, anything that like is around the world of what you're doing. And again, like getting people into more of the guts of your creative life, developing your rewards, like so exciting. I can go on and on about rewards for truly ever, which I won't do, but I will just say, you know, as I sort of alluded to before, rewards, you start with your physical item, you know, you're going to start with your book, whether that's ebook, audiobook, paperback, hardcover, deluxe, etc., whatever iterations, and then think about what other things you can do kind of above and below that. Some swag is fine if you know how to do swag. Swag is also an excellent way to ruin your life if you don't like really understand your timeline, your budget, your production costs, your shipping rates, etc. And like really do try to think about partner rewards, event rewards, virtual rewards, like things that you're not going to have to like spend additional money to produce and ship. So that's the sort of, so we've talked about the like pre-campaign phase. That's the like setting up your project. And then the running of it, you are going to shout from the rooftops to everyone you know, everyone you've ever thought about knowing, the audience you have, the audience you want. Think about every promotional avenue that's available to you. Can you go on amazing podcasts like Smart Bitches to talk about your project? Can you get people on TikTok to do advanced reviews? Can you get some press? Can you like, you know, identify signal boosters, amplifiers in your community? Are there other projects on Kickstarter that have similar audiences? Reach out, talk to them, cross-promote via backer updates. Any avenue that's available to you, you're going to use it to push the hell out of this project. And people say like, oh no, I shouldn't send so many emails or like make so many social posts. Like I promise, the day your campaign closes, you will get 10 emails from people who will say, I had no idea you were running a campaign. I would have loved to support you. This is just the attention economy that we live in. Promote everywhere, all the time, in all the ways, as hard as you can.
Yep, you are throwing pebbles into a roiling sea. Keep throwing, keep throwing,
yeah,
keep going.
Totally. Yeah. More and more and more pebbles.
What are some of your favorite rewards that you've seen? What are some things that made you thought, oh, that's brilliant? I love the idea of killing somebody and bringing them back. I know Lucy Eden just showcases amazing artists and people who are creative and so good at what they do. What are some things that you think work really well as rewards?
Yeah, totally. I think, you know, small stuff. People love stickers and bookmarks and enamel pins. Actually, though, beware with enamel pins because if you're shipping media rate in the US, an enamel pin will bump you right out of that. If you do like flat stuff made of paper, like stickers and bookmarks and postcards, you're fine. But if you do anything that's not a book, that's going to dramatically change all of your shipping.
Yep.
I talked about naming rights, which I love. I also think like notes from the field, outtakes. I've seen people write entirely new scenes to be as like bloopers, things like that. Or, additional writing work that you have. If you've got a backlist, selling for your backlist titles as individuals or bundles is an excellent way to like bring people into your whole oeuvre. For the art, we're seeing, the special editions are like really going gangbusters on Kickstarter. And
Oh,
so a lot
yeah.
of the rewards can kind of build on. I think the Bonkers Romance ladies have done custom vellum art inserts.
Yep.
So instead of having to do a split print run with different variations of illustration, they'll do like 10 vellum inserts, and you get to pick 3 that you like the best that you get to put right into your own book. So it looks, specialized to you. If you have art, I've seen a lot of like prints of various sort of sizes. People want to hang that on their wall. Zoom studio tours, custom playlist of like 20 tracks I love to listen to while I write, or a soundtrack to the book. I think also a really strong tactic for rewards, but just for Kickstarter altogether. If you are even a little bit Kickstarter curious, find 5 campaigns on the site and back them now, even for $1. Find and follow the creators out in the world, start to get a sense of like what people are doing, the
Yeah.
tone and cadence of their updates, the like what rewards have they offered. You can see what they've offered and also how many people have backed it. There's another thing I say a lot, but like I'm an expert in Kickstarter because I stare at Kickstarter all day long.
Yep.
And you too can stare at Kickstarter all day long, and you can find the best tactics and steal them and appropriate them just as your own. And that will help you find your own success.
For sure. What doesn't work? What are some things that you think are not a good strategy? Because I can see people saying, well, I shouldn't send out, all these email campaigns. No, you need to send out all those email campaigns. That is not a negotiable. What are some things that you've seen not fly well?
The success rate on Kickstarter in publishing, I actually have the statistic to share with you also. The success rate for the category overall on average is 56%, which is like it's not as high as I would like it to be. And so I felt like, I don't think that stat tells the whole story. So I asked for another metric, which is success rate for projects with at least 25 backers. In publishing for that, the success rate is 83%.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. So I think the biggest what not to do, like if you are taking your campaign seriously, if you are able to reach 25 backers, that's like a little bigger than like your mom, your best friend, the folks who are sort of obligated to back anything you do. If you can get beyond that and you have like done your homework, if you're not dramatically overreaching and trying to raise $43 million as a brand new baby emerging author, like your chances of success are really high.
Yeah. And if you are able to put together a successful campaign, in the end, you could make more than you would have made with a publishing contract.
Absolutely.
You do have to like manage shipment.
In almost all cases. Of course.
What is your advice for people who are like, yeah, but the fulfillment?
Yeah, it's a lot. You have to be prepared for that 100%. And there's like economies of scale with that. If you're talking about fulfilling to 100 backers, 200 backers, that sounds like you're going to get all the books shipped to your house, all of your associated rewards. You're going to get all the neighborhood kids, buy them some pizza, and spend a Saturday putting books in boxes.
Yep.
If you're talking
Get ready to make room in the garage for all those boxes.
Yeah, exactly. If you're talking about thousands of books, and if you're shipping internationally and you have much more, a larger number of SKUs, much more complicated reward system, you can work with a fulfillment partner. There are warehousing companies, like all of these folks will take a cut, of course, but a lot of print companies, Lulu and Ingram for sure, and like many smaller print shops are starting to they will do some fulfillment on your behalf. You could do stuff like tip-in sheets for autographs rather than getting the book shipped to you, signing them, then distributing them. You can get, tip-ins and send those back, get those bounded to the book. And then, I shouldn't speak specifically for like Lulu and Ingram, but I believe there are many options of this nature to like offload some of that fulfillment work and reduce your costs on it. But yeah, I can't stress enough all of the like pre-work you need to do to make sure you really understand what you're in for. Like all of these benefits will come for you, but also like you will have to do all the work.
Yeah.
So make sure that you have not set yourself up for failure by being overly ambitious, by like skirting around, bothering to do a full budget. Like get book samples and go to the post office and weigh them and understand what the costs are to ship to all the different places where you're going to offer it. You know, like just really, really do your homework so that you understand what this will all mean for you in order to get it.
I was selling stickers for a time on my site, and I had put together the envelope of every little thing that was going to go in them. And I actually brought them to the post office. And I said, my scales say that this is acceptable for a forever mail stamp, international or domestic. And I can use a forever stamp internationally to send this envelope. Is that right? I did not know this. The person behind the post office desk picked up a little fake door and slid the letter into a fake mail slot on the door. The mail slot was standard size. And they said for international, it has to fit through a mail slot with no problems. And this is fine. And I was like, I did not know about the fake door test. I did not know about this. Thank God I went to the post office.
That's so cool.
Isn't that wild? And they're like, no, it has to fit through this particular size of a mail slot. And I was like, well, glad I asked.
Another little plug I'll give. This is not like an official Kickstarter endorsement, but as a human, I recommend. There's a Facebook group, a private Facebook group called Kickstarter for Authors. It's run by an author, Anthea Sharp, who's a romance novelist. She's a romantasy writer. It is incredible. It's about 4,000, maybe 4,500 people. And like, I dip into it sometimes. I try not to like put my thumb on any scales, but like it is just writers all day long saying, did you know this unique fact about expedited shipping to Canada? Or where are you getting your sprayed edges? Or does anybody have experience with like split shipments and like these? It's just people sharing tips, tricks, strategies, asking each other questions. It is incredible. To be honest, I thought that I was like fully done with Facebook. I had like completely extricated myself from that mess. But this group is like so good that I come in sometimes just to like see what people are talking about. And I just think it is so helpful to any author who's on this path.
I just need you to know you're not alone. I deleted my Facebook permanently in like 2018. And I created a new Facebook this year, like a couple of weeks ago, solely to use Marketplace and local groups. Because my local Buy Nothing group is terrific. My local bulletin board group is amazing. And I'm like, I got it. And I was using someone else's account. And I was like, well, I can't say anything because I'm under their name. I'm just reading stuff. And I was like, I got to get back on Facebook for groups. And yet I know so many things now. I know all the things.
Well, and I really think that speaks to where we're moving into, like how different this moment in like the social media landscape than even 2 years ago. This is, in addition to that sort of like 100 true fans, like it's much more important to have, a smaller number of people who like extremely actually give a shit about what you're doing, as opposed to like maybe passively notice you once in a while doom scrolling. Like, I think we're just moving into these like small, intimate groups, as opposed to the like one to like very, very, very many that we were sitting in for a while.
Oh,
like,
yes.
That's community. That's what community building looks like. I mean, I wish I was not, contributing to Mark Zuckerberg's various takeovers of the world.
Thank you.
Like,
yes.
Yeah. But that's where you find the people who are doing the same things you're doing. And that's really important for all of us as creative people, but just as like people in the world.
Yeah. And barriers to entry for getting onto Facebook are very low. And of course, I friend one person, Facebook knows who I am, going back to like my date of birth. The other thing I think that's interesting about how we are forming into little communities is that it seems to me that in a large way, publishing is still chasing the big many. Like they're so focused on TikTok right now. And I'm like, I don't understand how this is a viable pathway to revenue. It is a fad, and I can see it's selling books, and I can see everybody putting out their TikTok table, and this book's big on TikTok, and every other book on Amazon in the title says big on TikTok, TikTok sensation, a gripping, thrilling, heart-rending with a twist, blah, 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 trope. We have all of these places where it's like a fire hose, where it's like many, 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 many huge things. And it's so hard to actually, like you said, quantify what are the actual sales. And also, are those people ever going to see you again? Or did they just drive by and see you while they're doom scrolling? You can't go from, I mean, you probably can, but it's going to be several steps to go from, oh, I saw you on TikTok to now I'm on your newsletter.
Right. Absolutely.
That's a very passive form of absorbing information. And I think people, like you said, are now trending towards actively curating where they're getting their information on purpose.
Yep. Yeah, the sort of like real recommendations from people you know.
Yes.
As opposed to like a trend you may or may not have noticed that you only sort of understood and barely cared about. I mean, and yeah, I think it's the same. Like, even if you do get a book on TikTok, are we sure you're going to read it? Are we sure it's going to resonate with you? Is that going to be the author that you would pay $500 for naming rights to the characters in their next book?
Yeah.
Probably not.
No, I see TikTok and Instagram as the aesthetification of reading. It's not exactly the book, it's the vibes and the aesthetic of the book. Yeah, and and it's weird. It's so weird to me because you see like romantasy, the cover has to match the vibes inside the book. If you're going to give me cozy, soft focus, like pretty Bob Ross style paintings of a cottage, then I better feel those vibes. Whereas with contemporary, it's like you could have a whole other set of humans on the cover and have nothing to do with inside, and that's fine.
Yep.
And it must be weird for you to seeing different subgenre project on Kickstarter that are so very different from each other, even though they're in the same major genre. Because the subgenres right now also operate so differently.
Yeah. And, I mean, there are more and more romance projects all the time. We are not at any kind of like saturation point yet when there's like dozens of available projects at any moment for every single subgenre.
Right.
But I think that what that has led to is people being like, well, normally I read only contemporary, but this historical looks pretty lovely. Or like, maybe I can try for a little spice because I'm so impressed by the special edition and the way this person has made it. Or like, maybe I will like move a little, I'll put a toe into romantasy because I'm like really touched by the way this person told their story or filmed their video or whatever.
Yep.
So I think that's really exciting too.
It is very exciting. So I am curious about your book. I want to ask you about your book. You wrote a book called Brooklyn Spaces. Speaking of very specific curated small communities, could you tell me about this? This sounds so cool. I want to know all about your book. Please tell me everything.
Thank you. That's super sweet. Yeah, I did. It's true. It came out almost 10 years ago, which is wild.
Hey, that's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic.
My book came out in 2009. I'm feeling you.
Totally. Yeah. Somebody messaged me about it and I'm not sure how you can, I think it's in that weird gray area where it's not like out of print, but nor is it exactly for sale anywhere. Although I think there's some used copies on Amazon. I need to write to my agent. It's sort of, I was very much in the right place at the right time. I had mentioned earlier that I had a career in digital media. I was just sort of like in Brooklyn, bouncing around, going to all of these like weird, strange, wonderful spaces. I haven't talked about this in a while, but I think the sort of inception was in one weekend. I went to my sister's an anarchist, so she took me to the 123 Community Center, which was in a squatted basement where they would do like pancake breakfast, bicycle fixing, anarchist reading hours.
As you do.
As you do, obviously. I went to that. I went to something called the Bushwick Trailer Park, which was a group of artists who had put a bunch of Airstream trailers in a warehouse and built like a little sort of like community neighborhood inside until the fire department came and was like, we don't understand what this is and we don't have a regulation against it, but it just seems bad. We're going to have to evict you. And this place called the House of Yes, which is airy wild, aerialist performance venue, also in North Brooklyn. Anyway, I was going to all these places and feeling like, God, my life is so impressive and incredible and wonderful, getting to just see this like unbelievable amount of creativity all around me all the time. And like, yeah, the 123 Community Center got evicted. The Bushwick Trailer Park, they were called something like flood I don't even know what they threw at them to get them out. The House of Yes burnt down, although they then rebuilt. But so I thought, gosh, there's like the thing with these spaces, these like weird DIY underground bizarre spaces, like they're so fleeting. They exist on the back of like usually one person like foregoing sleep and socialization and all sense just to like keep them going. And I was walking around saying like, there should be a record. There should be a record of the existence of these weird and wonderful places before they are gone. And I said it enough times that people said back to me, make that record. You just have to do it then, if that's something you want so badly. And so I started writing about them. Eventually, I was able to like parlay that into a book deal. It was a blog for a long time. I covered probably 100 spaces on the blog. The book is 50 spaces. It's all done through interviews with the people who run them, photo shoots with various friends of mine who are willing to contribute their time. The idea was gestating and like coming along for a long time. And then when I finally got the book deal, they were like, yes, we'll do it. But it was like the apotheosis of sort of like Brooklyn as brand. They were like, we need this book to come out in 6 months. So you need to write it in 3. So and a summer just like biking hither and yon, interviewing all of the weirdest, coolest people and putting the book together. And so it came out. I would say of the 50 spaces, probably maybe 20 are still open, which is actually more 10 years later than I could have hoped for. So that was my sort of journey into chronicling the incredible weirdness of Brooklyn and, the 20 teens or whatever
That's
it was.
So cool. That's just so cool. And you're right. There are so many spaces, both virtual and actual, that are in danger. I mean, Twitter is probably held together by duct tape and some dental floss at this point.
Totally.
One of the projects that I'm doing on the podcast is to recap an old magazine called Romantic Times, which went out of business in 2016. Very few of the issues are digitized, and I've been sent them or bought them on eBay. And not all of them are in there's one library of popular culture in Bowling Green State, and they have most of them, but they don't even have all of them. And so recapping this magazine, which was also a conference, like Readers Take Denver, a lot of the hope for Readers Take Denver and Steamy LitCom comes from the fact that Romantic Times Book Lovers Convention was a behemoth. It was thousands of people. It was the romance fan con for many years. And then it abruptly ended in 2016, 2017. A new conference tried to take its place. Then there was a pandemic. And now we're sort of coming out of the pandemic isolation thinking, oh, conferences is a thing we used to do. And the ones that we had don't exist anymore, or we don't want to go. And so you have this like new energy for finding these spaces together. I think it's really fascinating that your career has included both writing up virtual spaces and creating virtual spaces, but also writing about actual spaces that themselves were so fragile and transient that they were almost virtual, except that they were in a real place for a time being.
Yeah, I'm old enough now that I can do the thing where I look back and go, yes, my career was clearly a straight line leading me to exactly where I was, when, of course, at the time and always, I had no absolute idea what I was doing at all. But yeah, that's a through line. The other through line that I think is kind of marvelous. So when the book was coming out, my editor and my agent were like, can you write some other things so that people like know your name and want to buy your book? That's how I like accidentally also became an arts and culture journalist. But all of my writing always was kind of like in service of other people, like propping up, doing a review of this play or an exploration of like this event or chronicling this like cool piece of architecture that nobody really knew about. And so, I started at Kickstarter, and like a year on, I was talking to someone I knew from like my writing life, and she was like, you haven't done any writing. I mean, I guess you're so busy, but don't you miss it? And I was like, strangely, I have not felt a squelching of the creative urge. Like, there's no part of me that's like, oh, whoa, if only I had more time. And she said, well, it really makes sense because you've sublimated that same urge to help people into this thing that you're doing. Like, still, I am working in service of propping up other people's creativity and like helping them find success. And so I think that's pretty lovely.
And I do think that's a marvelous through line, but also a very particular people skill that not everyone has, that isn't appreciated, that you don't necessarily need to be the person doing the thing. You need to be the person connecting the person doing the thing with the person who wants to see it. Being able to connect two very disparate groups of people and two very disparate individuals is an art skill. Like it's an artistic skill, and not everyone has it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I I was reluctant to come to Kickstarter. I did not think that this was the job that I wanted. I actually, just before this, I was I got tricked into a marketing job. So it was my worst
not a
job
marketing
ever.
job.
It was
No.
so bad. It was like a year-long slow motion catastrophe. And I was extricating from that mess. And I was like, man, I really just want to go back to proofreading fantasy novels in my pajamas. And this Kickstarter thing came up, and I knew someone who was part of the whatever. And she had to ask me like 3 times, are you going to apply? Because we're going to start doing interviews. So, I really did not really know at all what I was walking into. And it like accidentally is this kind of really just perfect intersection of like all of these disparate skills that I have that accidentally really work well together to like do this thing that like I said earlier, like there's no analog to. Like, what other job could I have where I could like combine this really strange, weird set of skills and I think have like really great success.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Pretty good.
Well played.
Thanks.
Now, I always ask, what books are you reading that you would want to tell people about?
Oh my God. My favorite book from last year was Big Swiss by Jen Began. Are you aware of this book?
I am not. Tell me everything.
So the basic plot is that our heroine, she's like mid 40s. She kind of torches her relationship, moves across the country, and finds this like old friend of hers who's living in a gigantic farmhouse in the Hudson Valley in like upstate New York. One entire floor of the farmhouse has been taken over by beehives. She gets like mini goats. Her friend is like this kooky character. And so she gets to the Hudson Valley, our hero. She gets a job as a transcriptionist for the town's only sex therapist. So she sits at home all day, like transcribing all of these sessions. So now she knows everyone in town by voice and sexual foible. And of course, she later goes out and finds one of the patients. They fall in love. Insane hijinks ensue. It is one of the funniest books I've like literally ever read. Also one of the sexiest, just like so tremendously fantastic. There's a little Kickstarter book club. I made them read the book and like, yeah, passing it to everybody. I loved it so much. I got Jen's first book, like just finished last month, which like, it is also really weird and wonderful, but it's so clearly like this is the first book written by the person who will go on to write Big Swiss.
Yep.
Like a lot of the same early building blocks are there. There's actually both of them have a dog named Pignon
as
like
you do.
like yeah. So she is my current, and then the other one I was going to say. Oh, this is also from last year. Plain Bad Heroines. Is this a book that you are familiar with?
I have heard of this one.
I forget the name of the author. I hope that your listeners will look it up. I saved this because it's a big book, and like I live in Brooklyn. I do most of my reading on the go. I need it to be like light enough to carry in my bike basket.
Mm-hmm.
So I saved this for like the depths of winter when I was not leaving and could just sit on my couch and read it. It's got 2 plots, the old plot and the modern plot. And so the old plot, this is like minorly spoilery, but it's like very, very like the first chapter of the book. It's these 2 young women in an all-girls boarding school out, I think in Maine. They fall in love and then die tragically. And then so fast forward to the modern story where someone has written a book, the like literary doyen, this like young girl of the moment, wrote a book about these women, and it's being made into a movie starring the current lesbian, amazing portmanteau. So our 3 modern characters are the writer, the lesbian, and a supporting character. And then of course they have some very sexy hijinks. And it also like goes back into, it is like, the book is like really, really voicey. The narrator is like a character that you never understand kind of who she is until the very end. It's also like very sweet, very sexy, very gothic. Yeah. So those are my 2 favorite books I've read recently.
Thank you. Where can people find you if you wish to be found? And if you don't wish to be found, that's okay. You do not have to be found.
I mean, I've got a weird name and I'm very online. So if you want to find me, you can. I am at Oriana, BKLYN, on most social platforms, though I am spending less and less time on said platforms. But, I'm out in the world a lot. Come to the Ripped Bodice next Friday. Come find me at various Kickstarter events and presentations and AMAs and conventions. And, if you want to find me, it's not super hard. Do reach out. Let me know how I can help you, how I can support your work.
And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you to Oriana for connecting with me and sharing so many insights about basically what works on Kickstarter and what doesn't. I think it's really kind of cool to get all that behind the scenes detail. I will have links to all of the books and things we talked about in the show notes, as usual. And as always, I end with a terrible joke. This joke is from Bull. What is more dangerous than a formal tea? Give up? What's more dangerous than a formal tea? A casualty. Thank you, Bull, for that absolutely terrible joke. Casualty. On behalf of everyone here, including the cats who are snoring, I hope the mic is not picking that up. We wish you the very best of reading. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you back here next week. Smart Podcast Trashy Books is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more outstanding podcasts to subscribe to at frolic.media/podcasts.